Welcome back everyone to the Minecraft Forever world. You can see here that I've dug out this area and I've also expanded the mine off camera using our Essentials add-on just to speed it up a little bit. And from the rock that has been taken from the mine, I was planning on building a wall today in this episode. But I thought instead we might go for a little walk and have a little chat while we're doing so. So I need to find a village because I've been using stone tools to do the mine, just simply to save on iron, and that problem needs to go away. You know, we need to get iron and really start getting on into the kind of mid game tier, if you like. So I want to find villagers so I can build an iron farm either in the village and build a transportation system over there, or transport some villagers here eventually and have this kind of essentially build our own village with a trading area and an iron farm, stuff like that. Okay, so we need to find a village, or we need to find a swamp because I'm sick of falling in here when I am harvesting the crops. So I want to get lily pads. So I'm just going to pick a direction, I guess, and tip away and see. We haven't actually explored this map a lot. That is our world. So why not pick a direction and head there? And while we're doing so, we'll have a chat. So, as I said, originally I was planning on building a wall in this episode, and I kind of was like, that's a bit boring because it's another kind of building episode where there's a lot of talking involved as I build, or I time lapse it. And I was like, what do I talk about? If I'm going to do this long kind of building episode, what do I talk about? What's the topic? And one kind of hit me in the head last night, and it does actually relate to our wall in many ways. So, as part of my mental health journey, that we haven't fully spoken about yet, I have a gratitude journal, and basically, whenever I kind of get around to it, I try to do it every morning, but whenever I do it, it asks you to write down 3 things that you're grateful for in the morning, and a couple of things that would make today good or great. And then you do that in the morning or the afternoon or whatever, and then in the evening you reflect on the day, basically. What went right today, what did I achieve today, what was good about today, and what would make tomorrow better. So last night I was brushing my teeth in my bathroom, and I was thinking about this journal, and I was like, it was a pretty plain day. Like, I went to work was fine, didn't come home crying. Everything was fine. Nothing really of note happened. Work was fine, dinner was fine, the television was fine. I recorded an episode of Paleo Pines, that was fine. Nothing happened yesterday. I was like, well, what's there to be grateful for about that? And I started thinking about this wall that we're planning on building. I don't really want to go any further this way because it looks like it's an ocean. I don't really want to go into there because it's going to be a mob fest in about 5 minutes. So I guess we'll go this way. There's a lot of trees over there too, actually. Oh well, we'll keep going. I was thinking about this wall, and I was like, the whole purpose of the wall, really, and the kind of narrative that we're talking about in this forever world is that there's different kingdoms or different lands, and that's why we need to build a wall, because there's fear of an invader, there's fear of an enemy, and we're building a wall around our base to protect us. And to a degree, yes, there's mobs and stuff like that, but this is a single player world. We really don't have anything to worry about. We're not going to be invaded by a foreign army. So that got me thinking about being grateful. Look, we're dealing with a lot of water here, so I'm just going to make a boat and make it easier. I should have planned ahead and done that, but anyway, look, at least I have the wood, right? We'll lift our crafting table as well, because we're definitely going to need it. So, yeah, as I was brushing my teeth, it really kind of hit me that I'm here in my bathroom after having a very kind of uneventful, normal day with absolutely zero fear of being harmed, being attacked, being invaded, being shot at, being persecuted, you know? I live in a very safe place in the world, and I'm very, very privileged to do so. And that's everything to be grateful about, you know? I don't need a wall built around my land to protect me from the enemy, right? And while I was thinking about this, I kind of started, thinking about the word enemy, or what enemies are and who they are and what they could be. And I think it's part of the human condition to have an enemy. I think it's just in our nature to seek out and assign an enemy of some sorts to our lives. So having an enemy, I think, isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? An enemy could be an alarm clock. You could hate this alarm clock. You're in bed, you roll over, you set your alarm for the morning. I fucking hate this alarm. I wish I didn't have to get up in the morning for work. That's an enemy. That's something you don't like and you would ideally get rid of. The treadmill in the gym could be an enemy that you have to conquer. I hate this. Where are you? I hear you. You're not going to interrupt my monologue, man. Not by shooting me in the head, anyway. Talking about enemies here, and I'm going to get shot in the back. The treadmill could be your enemy that you want to conquer. I hate this machine, but I'm gonna get on it anyway, and I'm gonna walk for 3 miles, and then I'm gonna have a shower, and I'm gonna go to bed. That's an enemy that has to be overcome or defeated. So I think having an enemy in your life can be a good thing, but unfortunately, what also seems to be part of human nature is that we create enemies where there aren't necessarily any, or we unfairly and unjustly create enemies. And the example I want to use is the people of Palestine and the Israeli government. And I'm kind of, the more I thought about it last night and stuff, the more I kind of got angry and upset that more people aren't talking about this. I share stuff on my Instagram and stuff like that, but I feel like I could be doing more, and I get really frustrated that I'm not. And out of the maybe 400 people that I have on Instagram that I follow, there's very few talking about this. And look, we found a village. Excellent. It's one goal achieved. Not many people on my socials are sharing things or talking about Palestine, or kind of highlighting the injustice and genocide that's going on at the hands of the Israeli government. So I wanted to use this episode to talk about that. As I was brushing my teeth, I had water. I had fresh, safe water at my disposal at the very tips of my fingers. I had the building blocks for life on Earth. That evening, as I said, I had dinner, so I had a full stomach, and I was going to bed in a warm, comfortable space where I knew with almost absolute certainty that I was safe from harm. And this idea that innocent Palestinian people, men, women and children, are the enemy of Israel, that outside the walls of Israel and I guess the Western world is the threat of Hamas, the enemy. And that might be so. There are terror organizations in the world that would see harm done to innocent people. But the average Palestinian person who is just trying to live and grow in the place that they were born isn't one of those people, you know? They're just simply trying to exist in peace. And they're not being given that opportunity. They're being persecuted against. And let's think about that definition I just gave of a terror organization. You know, someone or a group of people that would see harm done to innocent people, generally because they have an agenda or they believe that they're justified in their actions, you know? So if we step away from the example of Palestine right now and cast ourselves back almost 100 years ago, a similar situation happened in Germany, where essentially the Nazi party in Germany that had come into power created an enemy out of the Jewish people. And at the time, I suppose, anti-Semitism was quite prevalent already, but the Nazi party focused on that. And they turned the attention of the German people away from the failings of the government that had been in place up until then, and basically pinned it all on the Jewish people. So after World War I, you know, Germany had lost. Through the Treaty of Versailles, Germany were forced to pay reparations for the war. Basically, Germany, this is your fault and you have to pay for it. And the German people suffered immensely because of that. Their economy was in ruins anyway, and then reparations were tacked on. Pair that with the loss of their own population, you know, like they lost sons and brothers and daughters and wives and children and everything else in between, upside down, back to front. They were dealing with the loss of their loved ones while their suffering continued due to reparations. And a group that was trying to get into power felt, I guess, that they were justified in their actions, created an enemy out of the Jewish people. They said, hey, all this bad stuff in your life, a lot of it comes from these guys over here. And from that became, you know, a genocide, a horrific act of a group of people onto another group of people. And that is terror. That is terrorism, you know? They're using violence against innocent people to get their way. That, in my opinion, is the definition of terrorism. And if we look at Israel now and their treatment of innocent, you know, Palestinian people, how is that any different? If these people are genuinely innocent, which, you know, I would say the vast majority of them are, and the Israeli government are using, you know, the terrorist attacks of a few in October 2023 to persecute these people, that's terrorism. That is terrorism. They are terrorizing an innocent population of people, and it's wholly unacceptable. And I'm outraged that more people aren't talking about it. But I suppose let's use another example to I guess reinforce my thinking, or even just to continue the stem of my thinking last night and this morning. If we look at Ireland and the British occupation of Ireland throughout the histories, and what happened once the British left, essentially. So in 1916 we had the Easter Rising, where a small minority of Irish people rose up against the British Empire in rebellion, and they were punished for it, you know, because it was, in the eyes of the British, an act of terrorism. After the Easter Rising, you know, the kind of public opinion in Ireland changed. because the leaders of the Easter Rising were executed. And that kind of, I guess, turned the public opinion, like the Irish public opinion, against the British. They didn't agree with the Rising. They thought it was essentially a nuisance and a hindrance to their city, the city of Dublin in particular. But once the leaders were executed, public opinion changed. And shortly after that came, the Irish War of Independence, where, again, an Irish minority, a rebel force, not an official army, were fighting against the British Empire for independence. Again, you could define the actions of the IRA at the time as acts of terrorism against the British Empire. But if you ask an Irish person today, those actions were justified because, it was an illegal occupation of Irish land, and the occupiers were, treating innocent people unfairly. Innocent Irish people were being treated poorly in their own country. So, the Irish rebelled. The enemy in that case there, if we're on the side of the Irish, is the British. The British are the enemy. However, shortly after the Irish War of Independence, Ireland got, not independence per se, but the Irish Free State was formed. And what that entailed was that the 32 counties of Ireland were divided. 26 counties in Ireland that had quote-unquote Catholic majorities became part of the Irish Free State, which was led from Dublin. And 6 of the counties in Ireland, the island of Ireland, would remain in the British Empire because they had quote-unquote Protestant majorities. Inverted commas there. It's a lot more complex and challenged than the way I'm describing it. And after years of fighting, the Irish population was divided. Some seen the Irish Free State and what I'm going to call pro-treaty. So there was a treaty agreed between the British and the Irish to form the Free State. Those who were pro-treaty accepted the 26 counties and that the 6 would remain in the British Empire. And then the anti-treaty side rejected the treaty, obviously. They were anti-treaty. And that caused a divide within Ireland to the point where we had civil war, where people who fought beside each other for independence were now fighting one another. And, to really kind of drive that home, the Irish Free State were given arms by the British Empire. So the old enemy gave us weapons to fight the new enemy. The Irish Free State formed an official army. They got arms from the British Empire and used those arms to fight the rebels in Munster who refused to acknowledge the treaty, essentially. And we had civil war in this country. So we went from having an enemy in the British Empire to having an enemy at home. Having our brothers and sisters and cousins and family became enemy. And what I'm trying to say is that there's always an enemy. I think it's inherently human to create an enemy out of something. There's always a disagreement. There's always inequality. And therefore, there will always be an enemy. And I don't think that's something that we should try and fix. Bear with me. If we have to have an enemy in our lives, let it be world hunger. Let it be climate change. Let it be racism. Let it be sexism. Let it be bad things. Let the enemy be the bad side. The bad things in the world should be our enemy, and we should try to overcome them and defeat them. That's what good people should strive to do in their lives, in my opinion. You're entirely entitled to just live your life in peace and protect yourself, sure. But while you're here, maybe, try help your fellow man. If we have to have an enemy, let it be, something that we should strive to overcome. Instead of making enemies out of innocent people. Starving men, women, and children looking for food and water aren't your fucking enemy. And you shouldn't treat them like that. People who have been, cast out of their own homes because of war and terror and drought and, extreme weather events, and are fleeing those situations to safety, i.e. the country that you live in. They're not your fucking enemy, okay? They are doing what any creature would do. There's a bird species, I believe in Australia, called the firehawk. The firehawk takes burning twigs and bushes and drops it into other areas to start fires. And what that does is it flushes out animals. So they take fire from one place, they start a fire in another place, and rabbits and mice and smaller birds and everything in between, they flee the fire. Of course they do, because they don't want to die. And the firehawk sits above and watches and picks off the stragglers. It uses fire to cast out these animals fleeing from death and catches them. And that's how the firehawk hunts. Any living creature will flee a situation that threatens its life. Any living creature, I believe, will fight for its own existence and fight for its own survival. That doesn't make them your enemy. So, if you see this shit going on, I suppose, in the streets of Ireland, where a very small minority are treating people of colour with violence and hate, step up and put a stop to it. Let those people be your enemy. Don't let the 8-year-old girl who's fleeing from Afghanistan be your enemy, because she's just trying to live her life. She's alive now. She can't help it. She was brought into this world. She's alive. She wants to keep on living. So she fled Afghanistan with her family, and she just wants to live in peace and safety. She's not your enemy, okay? The people who attack that little girl are your enemy, or at least they should be. And I think we need more people at this time in the world where so much injustice and so much change is happening. We need more people to step up and offer a shield to those in need. Be the protector. Be the shield. Be the sword that protects. Don't be the sword that attacks. And don't be the sword that attacks for no reason. Because that's what we're seeing in the world. Is that there's senseless violence. And instead of everyone jumping up and shouting and screaming and demanding that this senseless violence stops, we're actually, some of us, unfortunately, are encouraging it. And it's absolute madness. And if you're here watching this video, if you're still here, I appreciate this is probably a long one. I hope you listen to me, I guess. If you're here and you're listening to me and you're thinking, fuck this guy, well, man, I don't know what to say to you. I'm hopefully making a lot of sense here to you. And if I'm not making sense to you, then maybe you need to have a think about what you consider right and wrong. Because, the history of the Jewish people and Israel and Palestine and that entire region in the world is very, very challenged and complicated and difficult. And I'm not denying that. But what's very easy to understand is that a child or mother or father seeking water and food for their family shouldn't be shot. That's not fucking hard to understand, lads. Okay? An innocent person looking for food and water and shelter shouldn't be shot on sight. There's absolutely nothing contested about that statement. And if you think there is because, it's only bad if they're white, or, well, if it was a European, I'd get upset. Then catch yourself on, alright? Like, just because there's a terror organization in that region that look like these people doesn't mean that they are part of that terror organization. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say on it, really. I understand some people get affected by it. They get really down seeing all this negative stuff in the world. It's kind of impossible to consider everyone on Earth at once. I understand that. It's exhausting. But if you are on social media and you're seeing these horrific acts of terror and genocide, and you're not talking about it or sharing it, or at least trying to stop it in some way, then you really need to catch yourself on. We need to come together. And like I say in many of my videos, we need to spread love, we need to spread peace, and we need to look after our fellow person. Now more than ever, because I feel we are the most advanced we have ever been in history, in terms of technology and information and access to information and rights and freedoms, but that's in the Western world. And we need to use that privilege and that access to information to help other people, to lift them up and look after them. Especially, I feel, like Europeans and Americans, because we, and Australians, and basically the entire West, I won't single anyone out actually, we have a history of going to other places, taking land, taking resources, and making native populations suffer. Those were our parents' generations, our ancestors. It's not our fault, but we have an opportunity to make up for it. We have an opportunity to help the developing world. And you have a voice, and you should use it. So, before I die out here in the wild, because I have no idea where my house is, I'll leave it at that. Again, spread love, spread peace, look after your fellow person. If you see something going on in the streets of Ireland, it is your duty as an Irish person to step up and defend that person. As, the founding members of this republic did. They stood up against oppression, and now it's your turn to do so as well. Okay. Thank you for listening. I know it's a heavy one, but I needed to say it. And I'll see you in the next episode, guys, with hopefully a lighter topic. Thank you.